Bitcoin was this close to hitting $100,000 last week. And by the time you're watching this, maybe it's already hit that legendary psychological barrier of 100K. But if it took us 15 years to get to 100K, how long will it take us to get to a million? 10 years, 20 years, 15 years, 6 months? If you're a mega bull, I'm not super interested in the price. I'm more interested in what the world will look like at $1 million Bitcoin. Let's dive into it. So without question, Bitcoin changed the US election this year. I think that it was one of the hottest topics in the election, and I think one of the biggest reasons why Trump ultimately got elected was his pro-Bitcoin stance. But I think what surprised me the most was how pro-Bitcoin on the balance sheet, how much talk and discussion there was about how Bitcoin can actually save America as a whole. The American debt just passed $36 trillion, and Trump is saying, hey, maybe if we had a large percentage of the total Bitcoin supply, we could one day eradicate our debt because of it. And the more the price rises, and it kind of becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy. The more the price rises, the more interest that ensues. The more people get off the sidelines and start allocating capital towards Bitcoin. The more the Overton window shifts, right? When I got into Bitcoin, it was only for drug dealers and scam artists. And then that kind of moved a little bit to it's only for cryptographic computer nerds. Then it was only for small businesses. And then it was for El Salvador, but they're just a nothing third world country nation. And now it's for America. Now it's for sovereign nations to be able to fix their massive debt problems. Now we're seeing the psychological shift that frankly I thought was going to take decades, and it took less than 2, about 15 years to get here. But as you and I both know, value is neither created or destroyed, it's simply moved. You and I use our time to create value. There's energy moving from our time into a value creation object or service, and Bitcoin is no different. You have to have energy to bring new Bitcoin into circulation, or you have to use existing stored energy, basically selling other assets, in order to buy Bitcoin that already exists. So we have this post on Reddit here talking about how other assets are actually going to have a problem when measured against Bitcoin. I personally fully agree with this. We've got real estate, we've got gold, oil, other financial equities. The oil supply is obviously controlled by the government. We can see that in the pipeline fights that go on. And then equities, I mean, good grief. You cannot buy an equity that the government has not approved or has disapproved. But the most interesting thing about where this money is going is into Bitcoin. And it's something that's protected and defended by electricity, by code, ultimately by rules, but without rulers. So this says, by transposing their monetary premiums into cyberspace using a digital synthetic commodity called Satoshis, or Bitcoin, we replace the cost of human life with the cost of an electricity bill for defending our wealth. And this is monstrous. Effectively what this is saying is humanity has a better shot at living longer, at being more prosperous, and at being sovereign from these nations, which are currently using the threat of force and violence to control us. The money moving out of that system is moving into a system that is designed for individuals. It puts you and your president on the same level playing field. This is amazing. And this goes on to say, not having to waste human life to defend monetized wealth is worth every watt. And this is, I think, going into kind of maybe discredit this FUD going around that Bitcoin's a waste of energy. Frankly, I think Bitcoin is the most efficient use of energy on the planet. And you can absolutely see how that works in lots of the mining initiatives and the renewable initiatives. And that's a video for another day. So make sure you're subscribed if you want to see that. Anyways, today I want to dive into how, specifically which industries. We'll talk a little bit about housing, want to talk about war, want to understand how more money, more value leaving these traditional protected, defended assets and moving into this protocol-driven asset, how does that affect us on the macro and the ultimate macro, specifically with housing prices and with wars?
I know wealthy people, they own 16 estates on the Eastern Shore, and they live in 2 of them. Like, why do they buy them? They land banking. What does that mean? Well, the guy makes a lot of money every year, and he doesn't want to put it in a savings account. So he goes and he just buys a cool piece of property, and he buys another one.
This is The fall of fiat has been one of the main contributors to housing prices rising and making them unaffordable. This is some of the Cobra effect that we can talk about where the governments have made housing unaffordable. But effectively, when your money sucks, you don't want to hold money. And so what do? Well, you buy something that's gone up in value in the past or has some sort of tangible value, which for many people has been houses. Especially with the debt that you can get on houses, you can make your dollar go way further because instead of buying one house with $1 million, you can buy 5 houses with a $200,000 down payment and a pile of debt on the other ones. And so this land banking idea, this idea that I can put my value that I want to launch into the future into a house, creates a ton of buying pressure, which makes you and I, the next generation coming up, makes it a lot more difficult to buy a house, makes us take on longer debt, makes us need lower interest rates to buy that house. Lower interest rates create another problem with more inflation, and you see where the problem goes.
Well, okay, it sounds good, but here's the problem. The guy buys up the beautiful pieces of property, so you can't afford it. And if the rich guy wasn't buying up all the beautiful houses, they would cost half as much. So here's what happens. Some rich dude has 27 houses that are empty. You don't have a beautiful house. You have a family. Your kids, your dog could use the beautiful house. The rich dude doesn't even want the house. He just wants a long-term capital preservation strategy, right? And so that's a perverse incentive and a distorted economy. That's broken money. That's because the rich dude is using an estate on the eastern shore of Maryland as a piggy bank.
As a piggy bank. I love that. When we look at houses as money, and then you and I have been tricked into thinking that housing is the best form of savings, something that is taxed every single year, something that you can't move, something that's difficult to offload, expensive to offload, tough to maintain. A couple years ago, my septic field ran out. I had to spend $40,000 at the time, 2 Bitcoin to fix the septic. So my basement wasn't literally flooding with sewage. Well, what is 2 Bitcoin? I could pretty much buy a new house with 2 Bitcoin right now. And instead, I had to use it to fix this asset that I was told is a good form of savings. This comment says, it's not some rich dude, it's BlackRock, Vanguard, and other corporations. This needs to be outlawed. Oi, have we learned nothing about when you try to regulate a market? Single-family homes should be reserved for single families. Put a cap on how many homes you can own, especially in any business. Guys, when we tried to fix the problem of regulation, with further regulation, things get worse down the line. This is just punting the problem down the road. This is the Cobra effect playing out in real time. Yes, it would become more affordable if we had a cap on homes, for example. But there would be consequences down the line, consequences that I cannot even consider right now or fathom right now, because when we look at a free market, the free market has to work in a symbiotic way. Otherwise, the free market just straight up explodes. It doesn't work anymore. When we put alternative forces into this free market, we start to see how problems can exist. This would just be artificial price caps and controls, which never ever work, never have, and never will work. This is what the Fed artificially manipulating interest rates does. The houses should not increase in price. The dollars should hold their value so the rich person could save those dollars than buying a house and saving in the house. The property doesn't lose its value, the dollar does. So the only way to protect wealth is to own real things, real estate. And he's bang on. The problem, again, that I've had with real estate for a very long time is the costs involved in maintaining that real estate and the fact the government can just snap their fingers and take it from you at any time. When you own Bitcoin, you have the most transportable real estate, the most transportable real asset on planet Earth that you solely own and control, that costs nothing to maintain, that can be moved anywhere in the world, and that literally cannot be confiscated or taxed to hold. Yes, you can be taxed when you sell it, depending on the jurisdiction that you're in, but I think that's a feature, not a bug, because this actually puts governments in competition with each other. The first government that says no capital gains on Bitcoin is going to see a flock of investment, a flock of opportunity, a flock of new wealthy people entering the country. All in all, when you look at the cost between real estate and Bitcoin, Bitcoin looks kind of cheap. Bitcoin looks like a real viable alternative to be able to store your wealth in something. Now, what does this mean? This means that inherently what this, William Morris 3334 is asking for, this will just happen naturally. This is what happens in a sound money system, is assets become the value of their assetness at the present moment in time. You don't need some artificial savings account. You don't need some debt. You don't need, Housing prices won't be reliant on the interest rate. They will solely be reliant on what the cost of the asset is at that moment in time. And frankly, they should be pretty flat.
Because under the gold standard, the government couldn't print gold. And so they had a budget, they had a certain amount of gold. And that wasn't just, they couldn't infinitely increase it. They couldn't tax their population at will. And it's very difficult to take money from people. You go knock on doors and search everybody's home, see where they're hiding their gold. It's very complicated. On the other hand, when you gave them paper money, which is what the case was in 1914, you could take their wealth just by printing the money. And that's what changed everything when it comes to war. That's why the 20th century was the century of total war. Because under the gold standard, governments fought until they ran out of their own gold. Under the fiat standard, with paper money, with credit money, governments fought until they ran out of liquid wealth in the hands of all of their citizens.
That's such an interesting take. You fought until you ran out of gold, meaning you had to balance your current reserves, your savings, your future value with the current desire to win the war, the current ability to defend and win the war. And so naturally, everyone was kind of on a level playing field because as a government, you had to have a nation producing, you had to have a nation willing to give you the money in order to fund these wars. And then you had to spend it in a controlled environment. Today, we literally have a limitless budget. You have unlimited money in the world being printed at will by all governments across the world. And as a result, as Seyfedin said, the 20th century was a century of war because for the first time, we had these print-hungry politicians looking to claim mass war on each other, all because paper money existed. They could print. They all of a sudden had no budget. They had no need to live within their means and nothing stopping them from looking at numbers on a screen or numbers on a page and deciding to print more, fight more, and kill more. How can a country using Bitcoin survive when he will be attacked by a country that can use the unlimited dilution power of fiat money? Yes, this is the turbulence that is going to occur in the in-between between the fiat standard and the Bitcoin standard, a printed money standard and a sound money standard. And I think that the nation who stacks Bitcoin first is building their defense treasury. The nation that goes in, understands the power of Bitcoin. Look at El Salvador. El Salvador has a considerable head start at, first of all, overcoming the grips that the US dollar, the US nation has on them, becoming a sovereign nation as a whole, and then ultimately is going to have a stack of Bitcoin that can protect them, that can prevent them. As you print money, as you continue to print, you will be subject to the rate at which the weapons or the bullets or the war vehicles can be produced. And so, yes, you will have unlimited money, but you will still be bound by time in a certain way. And so the time to make the weapons is going to be one factor. But if you print too much too fast, you are going to have a dilutive effect, meaning you will have to print more money in order to get the same vehicle, the same weapon, the same bullet, whatever it may be, whatever you're printing to buy. And that inflationary event is going to be what causes this great divide to happen, because as you dilute your money, the Bitcoin held by somebody else becomes more valuable in real terms. Bitcoin cannot be abused because the money supply isn't controlled by centralized entities. Debt is a tool of tyrants. Great point by Safe with an E, Seyfedin. The rules create a level playing field, and that level playing field ensures that everyone has equal opportunity, but also that everyone is going to play by the same rules. On a Bitcoin standard, you are less incentivized to use tricks and gimmicks. You are less incentivized to print baby print. You are frankly incapable of print baby print. But you're also less incentivized to risk the lives of your citizens, because the lives of your citizens are the only thing bringing real value into the world. Think about it. If you cannot print money, the only source of wealth that you as a nation has is the entire collective value of your citizenship. So it strikes me that I, as a leader, wouldn't be willing to throw a pile of the strong producing citizens into battle where the probability of death is quite high. So, ergo, once again, Bitcoin aligns the incentives, levels the playing field, and frankly, reduces death by war because the incentive for war is far less on a Bitcoin standard. So, how long till we're there? What are the implications of getting there? Personally, I think the price of Bitcoin is going to go up very, very dramatically as our money gets dramatically worse. We've seen the US dollar in 2024, the debt of the US nation cross 34, 35, and this week, $36 trillion. And so, what happens? The dollar gets worse. What happens when the dollar gets worse? Assets go up. The game is not, can I outperform the dollar? The dollar is a sinking ship. Anyone can tread water against the dollar. So I encourage you to think about the second order effects of Bitcoin, especially of Bitcoin on the rise from 100K to $1 million per coin. Will we see more countries using it to exchange as legal tender? Will Bitcoiners ultimately have maximum political power during this transition period? Or will it continue to be seen as some investment? Is this just going to be capped at making money? In my opinion, Bitcoin is about freedom. When you look at what money is supposed to be, it's supposed to be a tool to capture your value and launch it into the future for generations. That's what money was designed to do. This was the tool decreed by God in the first early stages of civilization, of humanity. And we've gotten so far from that. So I ask the question, what does Bitcoin mean to you? How does the rise of Bitcoin from 100K to $1 million per coin change the world from your perspective? What are you hoping for? What is realistic? And more importantly, what does it mean for you and your family? That's it for me. Stay sovereign.